So Chris did a good job of telling us about making some advanced notifications that you could push directly to the watch. And what we're going to do, Benjamin and myself, are talk about going beyond notifications and actually creating apps, creating these full screen apps that you talked about for Android Wear. So I'm going to focus on making custom UI, and then towards the end, Benjamin's going to talk about data syncing. So it's worth emphasizing that Android Wear is Android. So if you already know Android, you already know like 90% of what you need to know to make a full screen Android Wear app. But as Mike said in his talk, you suck at your job, because just because you can do some of these things doesn't mean you should. You really need to tailor your skills to this new sort of form factor. Because there's a couple things that are really obvious, but you need to take into account when you're building an Android Wear app. The first is that they can be square or round. That's kind of a big deal when it comes to making layouts. And they're also small. So because they can be square or round, you have to make sure that your layouts are shape aware, because something that looks good on a square watch might not look good on a round one. And because the watches are small, you shouldn't try to cram in too much into one screen. I think both Mike and Chris kind of covered this. So you want low information density on each of your screens, and you want to use big gestures to kind of get around and do stuff. So what Google has done is they've created a wearable support library with a bunch of new tools that you can use and include to help make your UI work better for a wearable. And all you have to do is include a couple lines in your Gradle file, and you're all set. And you get a bunch of new classes that you can use. So I'm going to be going through a bunch of these and telling you how and when you should use these. So let's start with shape-aware layouts. So let's say we start with a normal layout. Let's just start with a normal frame layout. Put views in the corner. That's going to look just fine on the square watch. But if you come over to the round watch, it's getting clipped in the corners. It's not going to work. You can try to fix that by adding extra padding, but then that's just going to cram things in on the square watch for no reason, just to fix the round one. So that's not what you want to do. So we have a new tool, box inset layout. What this does, you can take your original layout, and you can wrap it in this new thing, box inset layout. And you have this one new attribute here called layout box. And what layout box does is it will add extra padding on just the round devices. So at runtime, this layout is going to check to see what kind of device you're using. If it's a round one, it's going to pad it, and it's going to leave the square one alone. And you have some freedom with how you do this, because maybe you don't always want to pad it all the way around. So in this case, I've picked all, and it's padding all the edges. But you can pick some combination of left, right, top, bottom, and all. So to kind of give you an idea of how this works, maybe you just want to pad the top or the sides, or you can do the whole thing. There's another way to do this, which also gets around this square round problem, and it's called watch view stub. So what this is, it's pretty much an empty layout that points to two other layouts. One of them is a round layout, and one of them is a square one. And at that point, they can be completely different. So here I specified a square sort of base design for my square watch, and a round one for a round watch. At that point, you can do whatever you want. So the two layouts I'm using here, just standard layouts that I just made sure look good on either device. So the one catch here, when you go to use this in your activity, because it's doing a runtime check to see what the device is, it takes a little bit before the actual layouts will be inflated. So if you need to get reference to your views, if you need to do something with them, you have to wait. So you have to set this listener here, this layout on layout inflated listener, and wait until it's ready. When the layout's done, then you can retrieve your views. All right, so between a combination of box inset layout and watch view stub, these end up being the root of most layouts when you're doing an Android Wear app. So for pretty much everything else I'm going to show, I'm going to be using box inset on every layout, just to provide the padding I need for the round watches. All right, so let's talk about cards. If you've used an Android Wear device at all, you know that cards are everywhere. It's a very familiar part of the design language. And with the support libraries, you're given a few tools to make cards of your own. And you can see there's kind of two different types here. The ones on the left, the ones on the right. The ones on the left are very easy to set up. They have a fixed format. So you have a title, you have some content, and an icon. The one on the right takes a little bit more effort to set up, but then you can do whatever you want within that card. So the first type is called card fragment. And I've just shown here that you can literally set this up pretty much in one line. And you can add this second line where you can tell it, if my card is small, do I pin to the top or the bottom of the screen? And that's it. Then you just add that fragment the way you normally add a fragment to your activity, and you're all set. You have your card. The other type is called card frame. There's a few more steps here. So you're going to have your layout. You're going to have your root layout, which is usually, like I said, a box inset layout. You're going to put this inside something called a card scroll view. It's just a container that you're supposed to put a card frame in. Put your card frame there. Then inside that, you can put whatever you want. So this is sort of an example here. We have box inset layout, card scroll view, card frame. And then you can add one child, and then within that child, it can be whatever layout you want to do. And so here I've just chosen a few text views, move them around a bit, just as an example. So in your activity, there's also some things that you can do to configure this. Just like your card fragment had this gravity that you can set to tell it pin to the bottom or pin to the top. You can set that on that card scroll view container to do the same thing. All right, so now let's talk about lists, because these are interesting on Android Wear. All right, so this is the sort of, when you go to the settings in Android Wear, this is kind of what you see. So as you're scrolling, you get this kind of snapping behavior. You also get this sort of expansion going on. But it's all based around the idea that there should really just be one big clickable thing at a time. And if you can try to click on the top or bottom of any one item, it's just going to scroll to that position. So the support libraries include Wearable list view. So here's my example where I've used Wearable list view. You can do all the same stuff, so it's really nice. All right, so to implement this, there's three pieces. You have your Wearable list view, which you'll put in the layout. You'll have your adapter, which you implement to add the data and populate your views. And then if you want, you can implement this Wearable list view item interface. So in terms of the layout, just add it the way you would normally add any list view or recycler view. The adapter interface is pretty simple. You have your uncreate view holder, where you initially create a view holder. Find view holder, where you take a recycled view holder, populate it with data, and then data item count. So if you've ever used the new recycler view class, that's pretty much all this is. And if you want, you can create your own custom view holder class to hold your views. And then setting up the adapter, this is all you need to do to get the snapping behavior and all that stuff. So really just, you get a lot right out of the box using Wearable list view. The fun kind of comes in when you implement this Wearable list view item. So this is something that you're going to put on a custom view, and that's going to be what you use as the main views of your adapter. So the interface here, you sort of set up an initial range of values that you're going to animate over. You have these two methods to get and set the current value. And then you have initial and final sort of startup methods. So I'll show you how this works in a moment here. All right, so you would take this interface, just make some custom view class. It can be whatever kind of layout class you want it to be. And you just inflate this in your adapter. All right, so here's an example of what I used for the animation that I showed before. So I'm going to have a scaling factor that goes from just 1 to 1.5. In this get current proximity value, I'm just going to spit back the value that I'm given in set scaling animator value. And then in there, I'm going to animate my circle to be larger or smaller. And I'll change the alpha value of the text in the list. And for these final two methods, I set it up so when the item is active, give it a blue color. When it's inactive, give it a green one. So here's that list again with all those features. All right, another fun pattern is the 2D picker pattern. So if you have a Android Wear watch, or if you've ever set one up, this might be familiar. This is just the initial setup where you kind of get an idea of how you navigate the system. So what's going on here is you have a vertical list of main items, and then you swipe right to drill down to more details. And so they're calling that the 2D picker pattern. So we have a class in the support library that can do all this. It's called the grid ViewPager. So here's my implementation. So I'm taking Guardians of the Galaxy characters and showing sort of quotes. So you can see here that we had our initial list, that we went through our main items. We drilled down into the quotes. We drill over again, back to the quotes there. All the good quotes. All right, so another fun thing that's going on here is you can see these parallax effects happening, which is something that happens a lot in the system. And also crossfade as you go between these main items. All right, so how do we do this? Just like before, we just take this, put it in our layout, pretty simple. And we have two choices of adapters that we can use, and this is very simple to a normal ViewPager. You can either use the grid pager adapter, which works with views as the main items, or fragment grid page adapter, which uses fragments. And again, the interface isn't that complicated, and it's not that much different from a ViewPager adapter. The only difference is that now instead of just having a row, you have a row and a column. So you have to set your data up in a way to be able to handle that. And then instead of just a count, you have a row count and you have a column count. Something you can optionally do is specify a background for your row or column. I recommend that. It's a really fun feature, and it's not very complicated. So in my case, I just have an image resource associated with each row of my data. And you just create one of these image references really quickly like this.
All that parallax stuff is integrated in that.
It's all baked in. So all you have to do is implement this one method, and you get all of that crossfade and parallax for free. It's really nice. All right, so now let's talk about delayed confirmations. Okay, let's say you're an important person and you're scrolling through your watch. You happen upon this tempting button, but you want to get rid of it. You want to dismiss it, but you have fat fingers. You accidentally hit the button. That can be problematic. You just did something, very big accidentally. So here's where delayed confirmation view comes in. So what this does is, instead of just immediately doing the action, you pull up this new button, with sort of a countdown timer around it. So it gives you a little bit of time to click on the button and say, I didn't mean to do that. So this is what it looks like in action. So we're going to scroll over, get that, hit it, just cancels it. And in case you actually meant to do it, you let the timer go down, and then it completes whatever the action was that you set out to do.
Can you show us the code for launching news?
So the delayed confirmation view, you just add it like any other button. But one thing I wanted to show, I don't know if it's easy to see or not, but there's a lot of attributes that you can set on this because it's very configurable. Besides the size, you can set the color of the countdown timer around it, the width of that, what icon appears there. So there's just a lot of stuff that you can do to customize it. So once you have it in your layout, there's only a couple of extra things you need to do in your activity. So you set the time that you want it to take. You set a listener for the cancel and finish events, and then you start it. That's all you have to do. Just wanted to show you what the listener looks like. It's just on timer finished and on timer selected, and you can choose to do whatever you want to do in there. So as an example, this is what I've done in my case. So on selected, so when you click it, just marking it as canceled, and then showing this toast message that it's been canceled and finishing the activity. When it's confirmed, person checking to see if it's canceled. Don't do anything if it is. Otherwise, I'm just launching this intent for this confirmation activity. So this is another piece of the support library where you can get that sort of confirmed information that the system uses just by launching an intent with this activity. Okay, now let's talk about long press to dismiss. Okay, so swiping to get rid of stuff is the default for the system. So I have my demo activity here, where each of these items just fires off another activity. And just by default, you can swipe those to get rid of them. But some apps might need to disable that. Maybe, swiping left and right is part of what your actual interface is, so you can't have that get rid of your activity. So what you can do is in the theme, you can just say swipe to dismiss is false, and that'll completely disable that. But then you are required by the design guidelines to implement the long press to dismiss pattern. There's nothing they can do to force you to do it, but you're supposed to do it. And so the way you're supposed to do it is by including this dismiss overlay view. And basically this is just to do that if you long press, it'll just pop up this big red button here. If you click that, it cancels your activity. And all you have to do is just make sure that you place this in some kind of layout where it'll sit on top of all your other content and sort of, expand in all directions to fit. But just adding in the layout isn't enough. You actually have to implement all the, dismissing logic and gesture detection yourself here. But it's not that much. So you just define this gesture detector, and you just say that, when you actually detect a long press, show this overlay view. And then once it's shown, it can decide what to do. And then once you have the gesture detector, you just set your activity up so that it's intercepting events, looking for this long press and making sure that long press event gets fired. So this is just what it looks like here. Okay, so I've gone through custom UI. Everything that I've done for those examples uses local resources, but there's some limitations about using, making a full screen wearable app. And Benjamin's sort of going to discuss those and talk about how data syncing comes into play.